Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 169. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Steph Katzovi about her new middle grade novel, Hurricamp. The story follows Laura Noodle Newman as she attends sleepaway summer camp for the first time. She battles homesickness, tries to make new friends, and then gets hit by a hurricane. If you've ever attended summer camp, you'll appreciate Noodle's adventures with an angry skunk, the pranking neighboring cabin, and of course, the beloved counselor. Steph likes to say that this book took one childhood and 6 years to write. If she could do it all again, Steph would embrace her camp experience more than she did when she was a kid. This book, Hurricamp, was inspired by her wish to do things differently. In this episode, I'll chat with Steph about her writing journey, why she chose to write this book for middle grade readers, who she admits feel like her peer group, and why she believes her main character, Noodle, is a better version of herself as a kid, and probably as an adult, as well as a few other things coming up. Steph Katzovi, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new book, Hurricamp. If you don't mind, tell us a bit about this book and what inspired you to write it.
I'd be delighted to. Hurricamp follows 10 and 3/4-year-old Noodle Newman's topsy-turvy experiences her first time away at sleepaway camp. And the story comically explores the challenges that Noodle faces as she becomes more independent and the complicated relationships of preteens and Noodle's road to discovering her inner courage. And since all great stories have plenty of drama, this happens right in the middle of a hurricane. And I like to joke that this took me one childhood and 6 years to write, but it's been something that I've had in my mind for a very long time, and as an adult finally got a chance to share it with the world.
Well, let's talk about the age group.
Mm-hmm.
This book is a chapter book meant for kids graduating from picture books before they launch themselves into novels.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about writing for this age group that you found so appealing, and maybe the flip side of that so challenging?
Well, I think in my mind, I'm frozen as a 13-year-old. So for me, it's almost, speaking to people that are in my peer set, even though I'm an adult now. But I think for me, a lot of writing is just about expression and things that I maybe wasn't aware of as a child, but have been brought with me as I've grown up over the years. And so I just felt this intense pressure that I needed to write for someone that would have been me at my age had I gone through these things and had more self-awareness. And so there was no question when I was writing what age group I was going for, because it was just definitely like 8 to 12-year-olds. This was such an important time in my life that I wanted to reach out to the people that followed in that age group. And so it really just kind of spoke to me as the right audience for the things that I had to say.
Describe for us the setting for this book. So sleepaway camp, for anyone that's been, it
Mm-hmm.
will, I'm sure, bring back memories of what sleepaway camp was like. But for anyone who hasn't been,
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about the setting and this camp that you've created.
Well, I call the camp Camp Hillside, and I wanted it to sort of be nondescript, but you got a sense of it wasn't fancy. It's a very rustic setting. And the whole point of the story was really for a child to be safely away from her parents so that she could experience sort of a character transformation. But the real element that I wanted to focus on was this character, Noodle Newman, finding her inner courage. And it didn't really matter that it was at a sleepaway camp. I think it's an interesting element of the plot, though, because a lot of kids are fortunate enough to experience sleepaway camp or some sort of camp experience, that there's that identifiable element of being with your friends, having all these fun activities and just not a care in the world, where, that can happen. But in my character story, she's got plenty of cares in the world. And I just wanted to make it an interesting setting to bring about the story that I wanted to share.
Did you have experience with a summer sleepaway camp? And did any of those experiences make their way into the book?
Yes. The true story behind this book is that I went to sleepaway camp when I was around Noodle's age, and I didn't have a great time. And I wish that I had gone back again after camp, because I think had I gone back a second time, I would have known a little bit more of what to expect and the experiences that I was going to have. But the reason I think I ultimately wrote the book was I wish I could rewrite history, and I wish I could have embraced the camp experience. So for me, I didn't have a great time. Not everything, that you do in life always works out the way you hope. And I'm sure that when my parents sent me to camp, they thought I would have a fantastic time. And it wasn't for me at that time. But I wish, if I could go back and do it all over again, I think I would have approached it differently.
And let's talk about your main character. Tell us a little bit about her and how she got her nickname.
Well, I think the character Noodle Newman is for sure a better version of myself as a child, and perhaps even as an adult. I got the nickname from a person that I was in college with, and she was called Noodle, and we played on the lacrosse team together. And she was this super fast, really speedy girl, and she had a very wild head of curly hair. And I said, when I was in college, I was like, that would be a really good character's name. So as I was writing, I thought back to what could I be calling all the characters, and I said, oh, Noodle would be a really good one. So I had to work backwards and create a fictitious backstory that she got the name for her curly hair based on her older sister looking at her and saying Ziti when they were a kid. So it had a funny little story behind it that wasn't actually what happened in real life.
Without giving away maybe too many spoilers, but giving us enough of an indication of how this character develops, what is her character arc in the story?
I think when she first goes to camp, she has these very high expectations that she's going to have an amazing time. She has an older sister who is somebody that's a diehard camp person, loves camp, had all these great stories. And I think Noodle was really excited to sort of have that same experience. And when she gets to camp, she discovers it's not exactly as she thought it would be. And it's a huge struggle for her to sort of step away from her homesickness and feeling despair and not knowing how to behave without the oversight and comfort of her parents. But because this is supposed to be a children's story, it's got to have a lot of humorous elements. So there's all these funny mishaps that she goes through. And I will spoil it in a sense that ultimately she has the camp experience that she wanted and had dreamed of, but certainly wasn't the expectation that it was a smooth path to get to that point.
And I imagine no camp would be complete, no story would be complete without a host of supporting characters. Mm-hmm. Were there any characters, either the main character Noodle or any of the others, that you found particularly enjoyable to write? I know you said you sort of identified with Noodle a bit yourself, but mm-hmm. Are there any that you identified with strongly, any you really enjoyed to write because they were just fun or good, or maybe they were the bad, mm-hmm. the bad characters and they were fun to write? What was that experience?
I think I really enjoyed the dialogue between the characters. And so some of the fun that I had as a writer was just making up like really silly things that kids might say to one another. And, there's some typical characters. There's the know-it-all. There's the person that's a little bit I don't want to say ditzy, but she's not the sharpest. There's a character that's a little bit more aggressive and sort of that bully type, the follower of the bully. There's a girl who I really enjoyed. The character's name is Buffy, and she's got these funny t-shirts that she wears, and she's just like a really sassy, silly, fun character. And as I got to know the characters through writing, I got, because they're based on people I've known in real life, not exact copies, but similar, I really sort of had fun trying to embody what I would imagine these characters in real life would be, but on the pages of the book. And so for me, it was such a fun process to sort of explore who these characters could become. And through many rounds of edits, I think I got to a good place ultimately, but it took a lot of time to sort of get to who the essence of these characters are. And I hope that comes through in the writing, that it's just a really fun way to find different ways to express, various types of people in the world that you might come across.
And one of the key elements of books for this particular age group is sort of the takeaway for the reader, the lessons learned aspect of it. Did you approach this book knowing what those takeaways would be? Did you have an idea of what you wanted them to be, or did they sort of spring up organically as you were writing it? Did you go back and read and say, that's what the book's about?
I think it was a little bit of both. When I was younger, I was incredibly shy, and going away to camp and having to make all these new friends was hard for me. In my hometown of Wappingers Falls, New York, I was known as this funny, athletic, witty kid. But when I went to camp, I was kind of this sniffly, quiet kid. And even though I knew who I was, I don't think the other kids in my bunk saw it. And that was a really tough realization for me to have as a child. And of course, as you get older, you figure out how to cope with being shy. And now I can use my sense of humor and my interest in hearing about other people's stories and lives to become a little bit more extroverted. But the process of writing really helped crystallize who I was as a child and what I wanted to change from that experience. And so writing the book was a little bit cathartic for me. I would say that's an understatement. It was a huge catharsis for me, but it really helped me get to know myself better, and in some unexpected ways as I was going through the writing process.
And what's the sort of feedback you've received? Anybody read the book and give you their impressions or comments, either your editors or beta readers?
I've had, it's amazing actually, when people hear about what the book is, the concept of the book, I get so many really interesting stories about people's experiences as for adults when they were children, or I get to talk to children now as well. And what's really fun for me is that my children in real life are the exact ages of my target audience, the 8 to 12-year-olds. And so when I have kids that I get to see from my children's friends, they talk to me about their camp experiences and they tell me their stories. And I just ran into a friend the other day who said, "You wouldn't believe this, but my daughter went to camp this summer and she told me they didn't have power or water for 3 days." And I said, "Oh my God, I wrote about that." She said, "I know." And, I couldn't believe that actually happened in real life when I had just imagined it. But a lot of other feedback that I'm getting is like, "This was a great book. I wish I had it when I was going to camp," or "I gave it to my daughter and it really was a great comfort to her." And I think one of the best pieces of feedback that I got was a young woman did a book report on my book for her English class this year. And my son happened to be in her class, and someone in the class said, "Hey, isn't that your mom who wrote the book?" And he said, "Yeah, it is." So it was, I was like, wow, that's so cool. I'm a book report now. And it was just, it's so humbling to see firsthand that I'm having an impact on people's lives. And I think that's really what inspired me to be a writer, was that I want to help give voice to people's feelings and open the door for them to feel that their emotions are acknowledged, and that a lot of the experiences that we have in this world are common experiences. And I think, ultimately that can create more understanding and hopefully bring more people together.
Have you always been a writer? Is this always something that you have wanted to do?
I think this is a great question because I have always wanted to be a writer. When I was 8.5, I said in an essay of when I grow up, I want to be an author. And my mother actually saved this essay and unearthed it a few years ago. But I knew, I think, when I was going to school and college that I wasn't ready to be an author with, the capital A. I needed to do something that helped hone my writing skills. So I ultimately went to law school, knowing that this was a stepping stone to something else. And so after law school, I said, I really don't want to practice law. I think I would rather do something in writing. And so I became a corporate communications specialist and then eventually an executive speech writer. But writing was always in the background of something that I wanted to do creatively, but instead for quite some time, I was able to do professional writing. So it's amazing that everything sort of led to where it did, when it did, but I think I consider myself very fortunate that I get to do what I love all the time now.
What are your goals now? Now that you've got a book done and
Mm-hmm.
out in the world, what are some of your goals as a writer? Do you have works in progress, things that you want to do?
I am working on a sequel to this, to Hurricamp, and I think the hardest part was finishing the first book because it seems like writing now seems a lot easier having accomplished one book. But I think I'm just sort of hopefully just getting the start of a book series, and I don't really know ultimately where my writing will take me, but I've really enjoyed writing blogs. I have a number of them on my website. I'm getting into social media, even though I was very, very much opposed to it, but I realized in this day and age, that's a really great way to connect with people. And so just embracing the various avenues that are out there for writers like me to connect with people and share some of my thoughts it's an interesting path that I certainly did not envision when I said, I just want to write a book. And that's that, because there's so much more to writing these days. But it's a really fun adventure.
And do you think you will stick with writing for this age group? I know you're working on a series to Hurricamp,
Mhm.
but do you think this is your voice, or does your wish list contain books in other genres?
I think that's one of those TBD questions. The truth is, my children, I have two sons, one's 9 and one's 12. And so writing right now is great because I get immediate feedback on what I'm writing. And then as they get older, I might have to switch to YA so that they can still keep up with my work. But I don't know. I think I'm still very, very much caught up in these characters. And I feel like once I've had enough of them, or perhaps they'll tell me in my writing that they've had enough of being discovered, I'll see where that leads me. But, there's just so much that you can do with different aspects of writing and creativity. I feel like I'm just getting started. So I wish I knew the ultimate goal, but I think it's going to be something that I uncover as I continue this process.
Clearly, we know there'll be more surprises coming for you as you continue writing. But I'm curious, what has surprised you about your journey so far?
I think the biggest surprise for me was I thought once I finished writing a book that everything else would be very easy. But as it turns out, writing a book isn't necessarily the hardest element. It's how to figure out ways you can share it with people versus just writing this book and having it sit on a shelf. And, for me, I really want to connect with people and find ways to make my story come alive and have it resonate with audiences. The thing that I enjoy most is really getting to talk to people, whether it's the grown-ups that buy the book for kids or the kids that read the book and share their stories with me. That's been the enjoyable part of this whole process. And turns out the writing and editing part is a bit trickier because you get so attached to the work and you realize, oh, this isn't as perfect as I thought when you go back and look at it. But now that I know that the reward is seeing people really embrace what I've written, it makes it a little bit more palatable. But sure, I wish I could avoid numerous rounds of revisions once I get through this second book.
So you're not a huge fan of the editing process, I take it.
Yeah, I realize that it's a necessary evil. Nothing's perfect the first time that it comes out of your head onto, in my case, a computer, but you really need to refine your work. And that's true in anything, whether it's writing or life. You don't get everything right the first time. And what you see as you continue to sit with material and as you look through it and think about things critically, you realize like there is so much room for improvement. And for me, the ultimate goal is to create something that I'm really proud of. And so draft number 2 of this book was probably something I wouldn't have been proud of sharing with the world. But after a number of, I don't even know how many rounds of edits I've done, but I feel like it's gotten to a really good place. And it's marvelous to think about what my original version of the book was and what it looked like and what it actually turned out to be. I think I spent a lot of time in the first drafts, like talking about what it was like when the child was going to camp and how she was packing. And while this was good for me, it really wasn't that interesting for a reader. So I realized the importance of a good editor and being honest and critical with yourself too as you're writing.
How about your support network for writing? Because I think just about every writer will tell you, while it's a solitary experience doing some of it, it's not really a solitary profession in that you do need support at various stages along the way. So how did you find people to support you in your writing?
I realized that you really have to sort of tap into whoever you can find that shares a passion or shares an interest in your success. In my case, I have a very supportive husband. I have very delightful children who offer their feedback and plot suggestions and character suggestions. I also had a writers group that I worked with on this book. And it's funny, one of the early days of my work, I brought a chapter in and I read it out loud. And the teacher of the writing class said, write it in first person, get rid of the sister character and see what happens. And it was such great feedback. And she was just so sharp in her candor that it changed the way the whole book evolved. And it made a huge difference. And I realized, as much as I thought just writing it and me editing it and working with another editor, I could get to a good place. But yeah, just sharing your work with others who really want you to succeed and want you to have your best work come out. It's key. And finding a group of people that can do that is, if you can find it, you're very lucky.
Any advice you would pass along to other similarly situated writers, people who either want to write and put a book out and they're struggling with either how to do it or whether to do it, or people who are working on their second, having to follow up that first novel with something else?
I would say, I mean, there's a lot of different elements to your question. The biggest thing that I would say is believe in yourself and believe in your talents and believe in your voice. But then on the other side, the practical side of me would say, but also make sure you're very prepared and you plan and you're diligent and you keep a schedule and you stick to the schedule and treat this as the job that you're not sure what will come out of it in the end, whether it's, remuneration or whether it's validation. But just know that when you've done a good job, that is payment in and of itself.
That's very good advice.
I should probably take that.
It's easy to give.
Yes.
It's harder to do, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Well, if people want to learn more about you and your book, follow along for new releases, things that you have going on, where can they go to find you and that information?
First stop probably is my website, stephkatzovi.com, STEPHKATZOVI. Also, I'm on social media at Steph Katzovi for Instagram and Steph Katzovi Lit on Facebook.
Excellent. And if they want to purchase a copy of Hurricamp, where can they buy it?
It's available at many online retailers. You can always do Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. I would say just type in Hurricamp or Steph Katzovi in your browser and hopefully you'll find a way. And I would greatly appreciate it if you do.
Well, Steph, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to wish you luck with Hurricamp and your sequel, The Work in Progress. So, congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you so very much. This was a really fantastic experience, and I really enjoyed it.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.